I had always thought I knew what love was. I believed it was simple, something you could feel deeply in your bones. It was the way her smile made everything feel lighter, how her laugh was like music, how it felt like nothing could go wrong when we were together. We had talked about our future for so long, about the house we'd buy, the adventures we'd take, the kids we'd have. It all felt so real, so perfect. And 2 days before the wedding, I was supposed to be filled with excitement, ready to take that step. But instead, there was this quiet, nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I couldn't shake. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was something else, something more unsettling. At first, I tried to push it away, to tell myself it was just pre-wedding jitters. After all, I had everything I wanted. A woman I adored, a life ahead of me that seemed like a dream. But every time I looked at her, something felt off. Her eyes, the way she looked at me, they didn't seem to hold that same spark they used to. It wasn't that she was rude or distant, but there was a subtle shift in how she acted around me. When we went out, she wasn't as engaged. We'd sit down for dinner, and I'd look over to find her gazing into space, her mind clearly elsewhere. It was a small thing, but it gnawed at me. And then there were the moments of silence. It wasn't the comfortable kind, the kind you share with someone you've spent years with. No, this was different. This was a silence that felt like a barrier between us. I'd ask about her day, and her answers were vague, detached. Her laughter didn't come as easily anymore, and when she did smile, it was like she was doing it out of habit, not because something genuinely amused her. I knew her better than that. I knew when her smile was real, and it had been a while since I saw one of those. I told myself it was nothing. She had a lot on her plate, right? Wedding planning, work, family expectations, all of it had to be stressful. But it didn't explain the way she'd start pulling away, both physically and emotionally. When I reached for her hand, she would pull hers back just a little too quickly. When I kissed her, it felt like she wasn't fully there. The woman who had once melted into my touch now seemed to shrink away from it. I wanted to believe it was just nerves, that we were both overwhelmed with the pressure of planning a wedding, and maybe that was part of it. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The worst part was that I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was me or her or something between us that was starting to unravel. There were nights when I'd lie awake next to her, feeling the warmth of her body beside me, and yet feeling more alone than I'd ever felt. The bed felt bigger, the space between us felt wider, and all I wanted was for things to go back to how they were. I wanted to feel that comfort, that sense of safety that used to come with her, but it was slipping away like sand through my fingers. I couldn't confront her about it, not yet. I didn't want to ruin the excitement of what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. But every time I looked at her, I felt a pang in my chest, a sense of loss, even before I knew what I was losing. And the worst part was I couldn't figure out why it was happening. Maybe I was just paranoid. But something inside me told me I wasn't. Something inside me told me that all of this wasn't just in my head. The silence, the distance, the way she was slipping away from me, I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I wasn't ready to face the truth, but deep down I knew it was coming. The little signs kept appearing, and each one twisted the knot in my stomach just a little tighter. At first they were so small, so easy to dismiss. It was nothing, I kept telling myself. I didn't want to be the guy who overthought everything, who let his insecurities cloud the reality of his relationship. But as the days passed, the things that once seemed insignificant began to accumulate. They were like pieces of a puzzle, but I wasn't sure I wanted to see the picture they were forming. She started spending more time on her phone, almost obsessively checking it, scrolling through messages that she'd quickly minimize the moment I walked into the room. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just work stuff or her friends, but something about the way she acted when I was near made me uneasy. The way her fingers hovered over the screen, like she was worried I'd see something she didn't want me to. I caught her locking her phone more often, and when I asked her about it, she'd always brush it off. It's nothing, she'd say, her voice light, but I could hear the defensiveness just beneath the surface. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But the small, nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't let me. She started staying out later and later. At first, it was just occasional late nights with her friends, but soon it became a regular thing. Girls' night, she would say, or I've got a work thing, but it was always vague, always a little too convenient. When I asked about the details, she'd shift the conversation or give me an answer that didn't quite match up. It wasn't the fact that she was going out, it was the way she did it. It was the way she seemed to pull away from me, like I was just another person she needed to check off her list. Like she was doing me a favor by still being around. Each time she came home late, I'd lie awake, listening to the sounds of her moving around the apartment. And I'd pretend like I wasn't watching her every move, but I was. I couldn't stop myself. She'd walk in, and the first thing I'd notice was the slight scent of perfume I didn't recognize. The way her hair wasn't quite the way I remembered it when she left. I wanted to ask about it, to confront her, but I didn't. I didn't want to seem controlling or paranoid. I didn't want to be the guy who questioned every little thing. So I kept my thoughts to myself, kept quiet, and let the doubt build in my chest. I knew that if I said something, it would feel like an accusation, like I was accusing her of something I had no proof of. So I stayed silent, silently watching the cracks form. The distance between us grew. It wasn't like we had a huge fight or a dramatic moment. It was the slow erosion of intimacy. The touch that used to feel so natural now felt like a formality. Her kisses no longer lingered the way they used to. Her hands no longer searched for mine in the quiet moments. There were still words between us, but they didn't carry the same weight. The conversations were polite, surface level. I didn't know how to reach her anymore. I was so scared of what I might find if I dug deeper. What if I was just imagining things? What if I was overreacting? But what scared me even more was the possibility that I wasn't. What if there was something going on? Something that I couldn't control. Something that was slipping through my fingers no matter how hard I tried to hold on. I wasn't sure what I was afraid of more, the truth or the thought that I might be too late to fix it. All I knew was that this feeling, this sense of something being off, wasn't going away. And I didn't know how much longer I could pretend that everything was fine when I felt like I was losing her bit by bit, without even understanding why. 2 days before the wedding. I'll never forget that moment, that gut-wrenching feeling when everything I thought I knew about her, about us, cracked wide open. I hadn't planned on following her. I hadn't planned on looking for something I knew could break me. But the tension inside me was too much. I couldn't breathe with the uncertainty, the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. And despite all the doubts building up, despite the fact that I knew I was probably just being paranoid, I couldn't stop myself. I told myself it would be fine. That maybe she just needed some space. That maybe I was imagining things. But that little voice in the back of my head wouldn't let up. It was a voice that had been getting louder with every passing day, every late night, every unexplained moment. And that voice told me to follow her. It felt wrong from the moment I decided to do it. I felt like a stranger in my own life, stalking my fiancée like I had no right to intrude on her time or invade her privacy. But the thought of losing her, of not knowing the truth, was worse. It was a kind of suffocating fear, something that didn't let me rest. So I grabbed my keys, slipped out of the house quietly, and drove in the direction I knew she was headed. I thought maybe I was just overthinking it. Maybe I was just about to confirm that she was meeting her friends for a fun, innocent night out. But when I pulled into the parking lot and saw her car, my heart sank. She wasn't alone. There they were, sitting on the bench by the restaurant, the man I had never seen before, and her. Laughing, talking like they were the only two people in the world. There was something about the way they looked at each other, something I hadn't seen between us in a long time. The way they leaned in close, the way their voices dropped into a quiet intimacy that felt so familiar, so natural between them. It felt like a slap in the face, and I couldn't look away. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe I was hoping it was nothing, that they were just friends, that I'd be able to talk myself into believing this wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, I knew what I was seeing. Her laugh, it was different. It was light in a way I hadn't heard in months. She wasn't laughing like that with me anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. She wasn't looking at me the way she looked at him. That was the hardest part. The way her eyes softened when she looked at him, the way her body seemed to shift toward him, as if she were magnetized. I didn't want to believe it, but I saw it. She was the woman I was about to marry, but she didn't look at me like that anymore. She looked at him the way she used to look at me, back when everything was easy, before all the walls between us started to go up. I didn't know how long I sat there. The world around me blurred as I watched them, trying to convince myself that maybe I was wrong, that maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But the truth was staring me in the face, undeniable and brutal. I wanted to scream, to run to her and demand answers, but I couldn't move. My chest felt tight, like I was drowning. This wasn't just betrayal, it was everything. It was the death of everything I thought was solid. It was the end of the future I'd been so sure of. After what felt like an eternity, I saw them stand up, and that was when I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't sit back and pretend like I didn't know. They walked away together, the way a couple walks, so effortlessly close, as though no one else existed. And in that moment, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I didn't even know what to do. I drove home in a daze, numb to everything. I couldn't process it, couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that the woman I was about to marry had just shown me that she was capable of this, of lying, of hiding something this big. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to ask. Had this been going on for a while? How long had she been seeing him? Did she ever really love me the way I thought she did? But even more than that, the overwhelming feeling that consumed me wasn't just anger or betrayal, it was sadness. A deep, crushing sadness that I couldn't escape. How had we gone from being so close, from making plans for the future, to this? What had happened to us? What had I missed? I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to see the woman I thought I knew, the woman I was going to marry, slipping away from me. And yet, in that moment, I knew there was no denying it anymore. I couldn't ignore it. The truth had shattered everything, and now I had to face it. When I walked into the apartment that night, she was already there, acting as if nothing had happened, as if everything was fine. I could feel the weight of what I knew pressing down on me, suffocating me, and yet there she was, smiling like nothing had changed. I wanted to scream at her, to demand the truth, to force her to see the way she had ripped my heart out. But instead, I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, watching her move around like a stranger. She kissed me as she always did when she came home, soft, quick, like it was something she had to do. The kind of kiss that no longer meant anything. I didn't kiss her back, didn't move, didn't respond the way I used to. And she seemed to notice, but she didn't ask why. She just pulled away and went about her usual routine, like it was a regular night. She told me she had a great time, how much fun she had with her friends. The words sounded so rehearsed, so fake, that it made my skin crawl. I couldn't pretend anymore. The truth, the one I had been avoiding, was there hanging in the air between us, and I couldn't keep silent. I didn't know how to do this, how to confront her without losing everything. But I had to. If I didn't, if I let her keep lying, it would tear me apart. I didn't know where to start, so I just blurted out the one thing I couldn't ignore anymore. "I saw you tonight," I whispered. My voice was hoarse, like I was trying to push the words out through a lump in my throat. With him. For a moment there was nothing. She just stood there, looking at me, her eyes wide in shock. Her face went pale, and I could see the guilt flicker behind her eyes, but she tried to hide it. She tried to hide it. She tried to brush it off, just like she had with everything else. But this time, I wasn't going to let her. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "We were just talking. Nothing happened." I felt a rush of anger, but I swallowed it down. The anger didn't matter anymore. It was the betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that she had been lying to me for God knows how long. How long had she been seeing him? How long had she been pretending that everything was fine with us? She had looked at me like she loved me, like I was the only one. And now I knew that was a lie. She hadn't been the person I thought she was. "I don't care what you say," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but it cracked. "I saw the way you were looking at him. The way he looked at you. You were smiling, laughing together like it was something real." I took a deep breath, my chest tightening. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you just be honest?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see the panic in her eyes, but there was something else too, something more hollow. She was trying to justify it, trying to make it seem like it wasn't as bad as it was. But the more she tried to explain herself, the more I felt like I was losing her all over again. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I was about to marry, wasn't the woman standing in front of me anymore. And no matter how much she tried to explain it away, it didn't change what I knew in my heart. I didn't know how to process it, how to make sense of what had just shattered everything I thought we had. I felt numb, like I was watching this all happen from a distance. I had trusted her with everything. My love, my future, my plans. And now she was standing there offering me explanations that didn't matter. The trust was gone. The foundation we had built our relationship on had been cracked beyond repair. And then, as if the weight of the moment hit her, she stopped talking. She stood there, not knowing what to say, and I could see the guilt settling in. But it was too late. I didn't want to hear any more excuses. I didn't want to hear how it wasn't really her fault, or how she didn't mean for it to happen. All I wanted was the truth. The raw truth. And now that I had it, it felt like a 1,000-pound weight had landed on my chest, crushing the life out of me. I stared at her, not knowing what to do next. My mind raced, my emotions tangled. I had to get out of this lie, this heartbreak, but I didn't know how to let go, how to let her go. I stood there for what felt like hours, unable to move, unable to say anything. The weight of everything pressing down on me was suffocating. She stood there too, her eyes avoiding mine, her body tense, like she was waiting for me to make the next move. But I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand answers, to make her feel the pain I was feeling, but the other part of me just wanted to collapse, to make everything go away, to wake up from this nightmare and pretend it never happened. I had so many questions, but the biggest one kept coming back to me: why? Why did she do this? What had we lost along the way? We were supposed to be building something together, our future set in stone, or so I thought. But now, all of that felt like a distant memory, like it had never been real. It felt like I had been living in a dream, and she had been playing the role of the woman I loved, only to reveal that it was all a lie. The worst part was that I didn't even recognize her anymore. The woman I had been planning to marry wasn't the same person standing in front of me. She had become a stranger. Her silence only made it worse. It was as if she was waiting for me to tell her what to do, as if she had no idea how to fix the mess she had created. But how could she? How could any of it be fixed? The trust was gone, the love I thought was unshakable had been crushed, and everything I had believed about our relationship felt like it had been built on sand. Finally I spoke, but my voice was barely a whisper. "I can't do this," I said, the words feeling like they were ripping through my chest. "I can't marry you." Her eyes widened in disbelief, like she couldn't understand what I was saying. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaky, but there was a hint of defensiveness in it too. "This isn't what it looks like. I love you." I shook my head, the tears threatening to spill, but I fought them back. "No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't have done this." Her face twisted with emotion, guilt and frustration mixing together. "It was a mistake," she said, but the words felt empty. She had said the same thing over and over, but nothing about it sounded sincere. A mistake. A mistake wasn't sneaking around behind someone's back. A mistake wasn't looking at another man the way she had looked at him. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. I felt my heart breaking as I said the words I knew I had to say, but that didn't make it hurt any less. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend like everything is okay. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't love me the way I deserve." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes that wasn't guilt or confusion. It was anger. "You're just going to throw everything away? Everything we've built?" I wanted to shout back at her, to tell her that she had already thrown it all away, that it wasn't my fault, that she was the one who had broken everything. But instead I just turned away, not able to look at her any longer. "Leave," I repeated, my voice breaking. "Just go." She didn't move at first. She just stood there like she was hoping I'd change my mind. But I couldn't. I knew in that moment that the person I had once loved, the woman I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, was gone. And maybe she had been gone for a long time, but I hadn't been able to see it until now. It felt surreal watching her pack her things, watching her walk out of my life just days before we were supposed to start our future together. I wanted to believe that this wasn't real, that she would come back and apologize, that everything would go back to the way it was. But deep down I knew it was over. She had chosen him, and in doing so, she had chosen to walk away from everything we had built. As the door clicked shut behind her, a strange emptiness settled over me. I had just lost the woman I was supposed to marry, and no matter how much I tried to hold on to what we had, I knew it was gone. I was left standing in the wreckage of my own heart, not sure how to pick up the pieces.